Welcome to Kitchen Table Finance, the podcast where we serve up bite-sized pieces of financial advice to simplify your money and your life. Join your hosts, David Shotwell and Nick Nauta, and let's get started.
Hello and welcome to the Kitchen Table Finance podcast. I am joined today by the newly minted CFP, Mr. Cole Williams, and we have a ton of awesome stuff to talk about today. One of my favorite topics, Cole, which is the Kinder Institute method for financial life planning. And I'm super pumped to have you on the show today because you are in the process, just completed 2 out of the 3 parts to become an RLP and are actively working in the third part, where you will soon be able to add a registered life planner to your credential list, right?
Yes, it's the resume of all financial professionals is how many 3 and 4 digit accolades can you put next to your name. So yep, that'll be another one we can add to the list.
There you go. There you go. Well, this is personally my favorite. Obviously the CFP, the technical side of things, but I think that in today's world, being a registered life planner through the Kinder Institute is so important, as we talk about all the time on this show. AI and the advance of technology and financial planning becoming more and more accessible on the knowledge side. The hard part about that has always been, how do you connect that to a life worth living, right? And how do you have those conversations around what's most important to you? How do you then take all of those ideas and prioritize them and then figure out the financial aspects of like what of those things are we going to be able to do and how do we focus on kind of what's most important? And I guess we would be remiss to not talk about Mr. George Kinder himself. Did you get to meet George as a part of your life planning journey?
I did not. I met some really wonderful people and a lot of the Kinder disciples, but I did not have the opportunity to actually meet George himself. No.
Oh, bummer. He usually tries to jump on at least one of those Zoom calls, but I've met him a couple times, met him in person at an XYPN Live when I took the first class that he actually taught, and then through Zoom several times. So he's kind of considered the father of life planning, obviously the founder of the Kinder Institute, and developed this process that we're going to talk about today for how to kind of merge financial planning with personal fulfillment and purpose and all those things that, you know, around here are the more important parts of having a financial plan or retirement plan in general. So with that, Cole, would love to hear, obviously just going through the process, kind of what were some of your key takeaways, and then maybe walking us through the first part of that process.
Yeah. Well, my biggest takeaways thus far through doing the training is it highlights something that a lot of financial professionals, myself included, struggle with, which is the value of not talking, particularly the value of active listening, and how allowing people to have the space to work through difficult questions that maybe they haven't really considered before gets us to the heart of what they want much faster than me putting cool graphics up on a screen and explaining the math of their investments. So that was by far the biggest thing for me, was seeing, frankly, in a way, it's like how less really is more.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a science and an art to that, but I love that kind of that as one of the things that you thought about. And you know, this has been years ago now, but going through this whole process and just doing the life planning for several clients over the last 5 or 6 years, one of the things that stands out is always, it's not, nobody through this process is like, man, I just need, $500,000 more dollars, or I need to make another, $50,000 a year. It's like all the things that you really want, you can have. Money isn't the thing you need more of, right? It's relationships, it's family, it's creativity, it's all those other aspects, right?
Yeah. Agreed. I feel like you asked me a second part of that question that I forgot. as well.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna dig into the 3 questions and kind of lay out the process of the Kinder method, if you will, which we use here at SRB. Ours is the strategic, reliable blueprint, but the first half of that is exactly the Kinder method, right?
Yep.
The evoke method, if you will.
The evoke, yes. Yes. Well, the Kinder process, like you said, of which we follow pretty closely, essentially breaks down to 3 questions. 3 questions are very simple, but they are questions that really force you to think and are questions that I think most people haven't really considered. A really fun exercise to go through with them because it's more of going on a journey with someone than it is instructing or teaching or showing, which is fun because a lot of our job, which I like this part of our job, but a lot of our job is almost like being a teacher. But this way, it's almost like friends on a trip in a way, and you get to learn about
Yeah,
everybody. So,
a guide, if you will. Yeah.
guide, exactly, a financial shaman, if you will.
hmm Well, and before you get into the questions, one of the things that always struck me, and I've said it on the show a couple different times, we spend our whole life like saving and planning for retirement and setting aside money, and we spend about 5 minutes thinking about like what that means and what we actually need out of retirement. And so the first part of this process, which is the life planning part, is us taking 3 4 sometimes 5 hours just to think through all of those things and have time and space with like what it means to retire and what you're going to do and what's most important to you. And that was kind of when I first started doing it. It's just kind of one of those aha moments, like, you've saved million, $2 million for retirement, and you have thought very little about what that actually means or what you want it to mean, and just have that time and space to think through that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's I would argue it is some of the greatest value that we can actually provide
Hmm.
for our clients,
Yeah,
which is not what
for sure.
which is not what I think most people come in looking for, but I think that
Yeah.
it really helps get people on the right track. So
Well, I'm at a point now where I couldn't do a retirement plan without like figuring out the first part of this and like having those conversations because I wouldn't even know where to start, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's I mean, what is your analogy about where do you start when you're building a puzzle?
Oh yeah, my jigsaw puzzle analogy.
Yeah.
That I stole that from Mitch Anthony, which is, what's the most important piece of a jigsaw puzzle? Everybody always starts with the corners, but to me, and this is a trick question, which is part of the reason I love it, is the picture on the box.
Mhm.
Right? In this, Kinder method life planning is figuring out what that picture is,
Yeah.
and then we can start moving around the financial pieces, right? Otherwise, we're just jamming pieces together and hoping for the best.
Mhm.
But when we get real specific about what exactly it is you want it to look like, then we're making decisions that are based on, is this getting you closer or further away from what you truly want? And that's a whole different conversation than, is this getting you more of net worth or more of a return, right?
Yeah.
Because return on investment is not nearly as important as return on life.
Exactly. Exactly right. Well, you want to jump into the questions?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
What's question 1?
So, question 1, more or less, I'll kind of summarize it, is if you had all the money that you needed, what would you do with your life? Essentially, getting at if money wasn't an issue, how would you live? And this question almost always, people start to reveal their dreams, maybe some kind of crazier dreams, things like that, kind of like a winning the Powerball situation of you have no limits and restrictions. And it's fun and it provides a lot of opportunity to get at, what people want and desire, and it's kind of the least emotional of the 3 questions, but it's kind of a way to get your guard down in a way, and to also get you to start really thinking about what you want.
Yeah, I love this question. I usually end up going through these questions every year or two. And this one's always like, I'm always coming up with weird stuff. But it's interesting to me because, if you're driving or walking or whatever you're doing, every once in a while some weird thing will pop into your mind of like, yeah, if I had enough money, it'd be cool to do that, right?
Yep.
But to actually like put it down on paper and think through that is a lot of fun, and it's insightful a lot of times too. Because sometimes we find that some of that stuff that's on your kind of fun to list is possible, right?
Question 1 is relatively sunshine and rainbows. Question 2 is where the rubber starts to meet the road a little bit, and it's essentially, if you knew that you only had 5 to 10 years left to live, what about question 1 would you change or refine or place more of an emphasis on? And that is where it starts to get real, and it really cuts through a lot of the BS of life and a lot of the that'd be fun, but I don't really care about that as much. And it really is here where we start to find where a lot of the things that are important to us, like you said in the beginning of the podcast, really aren't super money related.
Right.
And where it gets more fun because we start to view money as a tool to do the things that we actually care about, as opposed to accumulate things or to be a number on a statement.
Yeah. What's interesting, because this is always a mix of, when we go through this with clients, it's some of that fun to stuff is on there, but a lot of that like ought to, like, if I only have 5 to 10 years left to live, I better get my finances and organized, and I better get an estate plan kind of thing, right? But it's also some of the more like, hey, this is something that I really want to do, and if I only had 10 years left, you better believe that I would make some changes to get something like that done.
Exactly right. And question 3 is the ultimate one. It says, if your doctor told you that you only had 24 hours, what would you regret not doing? And that really is obviously the most powerful question. It really cuts to the deepest values that you have. And it's a sad question in a way if you really sink into it because it's just about regret. But at the same time, it really does get to the heart of just what is important to you.
Yeah.
And essentially, if you can, with clarity, answer this question, in a way, the plan almost starts to build itself.
Right.
It
Yeah.
really is. It really is
Hmm.
like, "Hey, I guess we know what we're doing. I guess we really know what
Yeah.
step 1 of this is," right?
Well, it's such an interesting question, because you're going to have one of two outcomes, right? You're going to immediately think of like a handful of things that you really regretted. It's, what did you regret not being able to do, not being able to be? There's a lot of different things that, get unpacked there. And this is really the ultimate question for how do we start prioritizing, right? So we kind of get deeper and deeper. That first question is, let's get as wide as we can. Let's think about all the things that we wanted to do. But then as we distill it down to thinking about what you regretted not being able to do, now we usually have one or two, three things that pop out of like, hey, these are, my heart's core. I absolutely need to have these in my plan. I should be doing them now, kind of thing. And that's super powerful to think through. It's always interesting to me. Like I said, I do it every couple of years or so, and there's always something new that pops up, which is fantastic. Obviously, as humans, we change, and as Dave likes to say on this show, we're as humans, we're also very terrible at planning out past like 2 or 3 years, like of thinking what our future selves will want or need at that point. And so what I like about it is it really does distill it down to the here and now of like, hey, this is super important to me. I need to be able to accomplish this in the next, months, not years kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which is super helpful from a behavioral finance standpoint because you're really thinking through like, if something is more than 3 or 4 years out, it's really hard to behaviorally like make those changes that you need to in order to do those things. So I think that part is super important. And I find it fascinating that things that come up, like we talked about earlier, are generally not like, hey, I regret not buying the beach house. You know what I mean? Like, it's more about, hey, I regret not having that time with my family in that space and, having those connections or, seeing my kids grow up or whatever it is, which really gets to the heart of like, maybe family is the most your heart's core and spending time with them. And, the great news about that is it doesn't cost you any money. It can cost money, but it doesn't have to cost money, right? And so figuring that out, it's just super powerful for a lot of people. And the other side of it that I love too is, every once in a while we get some people in here who are like, I don't really have anything that I would change. I don't really have anything that I regret. And to me, that's just at first going through the process of becoming an RLP. That was one of those like disappointing, like, what bummer I didn't help this person like find their one true thing that they were missing in their life. But the flip side of that is, the rarity and the beauty of having everything and not having regrets and being in that space in life is so amazing. And to uncover that and to find that out about yourself and to be able to just sit in that and that in knowing that you're in that space, like you can't ask for better than that, right? And so then it's more about how do we keep those things happening for the next 10, 15, 20 years, as opposed to how do we make changes, which is just as powerful, if you ask me.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah, I mean, that's that rare person that really, like you said, doesn't have those regrets, that is, happy where they are, content, things like that. Like, that's wealth. I mean, that really is. I mean, you know how many people that have, enormous sums of money that are basically trying to just get there, get to that point. And
And this happens, and there's a bunch of research on it. But like once you hit the first million, then automatically your brain's like, well, what does two look like? Now I need
mhm,
two, right? Like there's always, I may start making 100,000. Now I want to make 200,000 or 200. You know what I mean? Like that is the rat wheel of there is never enough.
yeah,
And the flip side of that is if you are in that place where you don't have any regrets, like you have enough like that, like you can't ask for more than that, right? Like there's nothing to chase at that point, which is fantastic. And just this thought process of what is your enough and how do you find your enough. And if you're not asking these questions, if you're not thinking through this, you won't find it. It will always be a math problem, and the math problem's answer is always grow, 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 right?
yeah, always.
And just to kind of relate this back to traditional financial planning, if it is just about the numbers and trying to grow the numbers and making sure that, you have enough money in retirement and you're constantly growing, you're missing out on a lot and that's where we talk about like moving the puzzle pieces around. If we don't know what the shape is supposed to be, then we're just searching for the numbers. And then the numbers are always growing. And in the traditional sense of retirement planning, if we think of what drives financial planning on the investment side, is having net worths that grow. Because if you are charging based on, and if you are incentivized as a financial planner based on the size of your client's net worth or what they have to invest, you're always going to be conservative about the numbers. You're always going to be less likely to spend that money, because as the portfolio grows, so does the advisor's fee grow, right? And so that's kind of the downside of that type of planning when it's just looking at net worth and growing. You're not getting into using money as a tool, which is what it's really ultimately there for.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. And I guess kind of to build on that too. So from the last class that I took, step 2 of 3 to become an RLP, Louis, who is very famous in the world of life planning, he kind of talked about how, this technically is a professional designation and you get to have your letters and things like that. But he's like, most people don't, go out and advertise this necessarily because it feels silly to in a way, because like you could advertise it, but people don't know until they've really started to immerse themselves in the process, even what that means and how that works. And to build on it, I'm kind of the front guy for our firm. When you're looking to get in touch with us, you're going to talk to me first. And I've yet to have a single prospective client, someone who's interested in meeting with us, ever come in and say, "I need you to help me plan my life." Like, this never happened. There's always a specific problem that you have or question that you have, or you want help with this thing over here and whatever else. And that's great. And we love helping people with those things. But, to get you to the place where you're actually going to have a good chance to find contentment and happiness in your financial plan, it's like there are a lot of other things that we need to do first.
Well, I say this a lot of times too to newer clients, but I can solve your math problem, but you're not gonna like the answer, right? Because the answer is live in a cardboard box and save and invest every penny, and that is the best way to maximize your net worth. But you're getting zero utility out of said net worth, and that's probably not what you want. Nobody has taken me up on that yet. I'm sure there's somebody out there in the crazy world that we live in that has tried that. But for the most part, people aren't doing that, right? And so, what's that balance point? What do you really need to get out of your money? What's most important to you? And that's why we feel so strongly about having to have this process set up so that we can help you figure that out. Most clients don't have that come to us, not everybody, but it's usually not a money problem. It's more of a clarity problem, right? And so, yes, you have some money questions. That's why you come see a financial planner. But the answer to those are buried in the clarity of what's most important to you and what do you really want to accomplish. And so that's why having those steps beforehand, having those, and our process is actually 3 meetings, right? We have that first meeting where we just find out what's important to you, just having a general conversation. Then we do the 3 questions in our vision meeting. And then we get into the obstacles meeting, which is figuring out like what's getting in your way. Why haven't you done this yet? What's going to stop you from doing this? Which is also really important to make sure we're addressing all those things, which is also one of the reasons why, and I've seen this in my own life, having a guide to walk you through that is so important, because so many people can go out and they can answer these questions. They're on the internet, and they can come up with the answers, but the 99.9% of people can't, go from answering the questions to actually inputting that in their life. And it's not necessarily a math problem, it's more of a support problem of, hey, you actually can do this. And answering those questions myself, by myself, and not having somebody versus working with somebody who is a life planner to help you through that is just so extremely impactful. I can't even tell you how much further I got by working with someone versus trying to do it on my own. And so that is why we put it into our process for all new clients, because it's just such a valuable, important part of this whole thing. So that being said, there are some resources out there, and nobody's going to get hurt by trying these questions out and going through this stuff on their own. George Kinder actually has a book called Life Planning for You, with a corresponding website. So you can read the book about how to walk yourself through this, as well as going through and answering the questions on the website. I believe it's free. If not, you might have to buy the book first. I'm not entirely sure about that. But that's a great first step of thinking through and having those conversations and starting that process of like, hey, I want to retire. What does it look like? What's important to me? How do I start like thinking through what that might be? So we'll go ahead and throw that into the show notes here. But again, it's lifeplanningforyou.com. So with that being said, Cole, I guess I will let you close with maybe the one thing that, and I know it's hard to distill maybe down to one, but going through the process, becoming an RLP, like what was the one thing that really stood out to you?
It's like asking me my favorite movie. So many. Well, I would say one of the most encouraging things that I really found through the program was how little encouragement and reinforcement it takes to really light a fire within someone to encourage them to go out and do what they want to do. I think particularly there's kind of like a Midwestern cultural thing. Obviously, a lot of our clients are Midwestern folk where we self doubt, maybe is the wrong word, but it's like we almost have this fear of being very outward and open about our big wants and dreams and desires and goals and things that we have for ourselves. So we keep those inside a lot. And what's fun through this process is that you kind of get to reveal some of those. And what can be even better is when you reveal those, you don't have somebody go like, oh, well, that's like kind of selfish, isn't it? Or like, oh, well, that's too big. Like, no, but you can't accomplish that. To have the flip side of that, where somebody's like, you should definitely do that. That's fantastic. We should figure out a plan to make that happen. And you can see even people that are going through the process that are like going to be the trainers, right? Like, we get life planned as we go through the process. It's like their eyes light up. They get so excited. There's so much energy and momentum behind doing this thing. And it's really, really neat to see. So that's, to me, that's so much fun.
What's why I love this job and doing this for clients. And I'm super excited for you to be able to start doing more of this as well. Because it is great. And it's great to be in the opposite position too, of like being that person that's supporting someone else. And, we're all looking for affirmation, and to have somebody that's with you that can do that. And it just, like I was talking about earlier, it just, like like you said, lights the fire and makes those things happen so much faster than if you were just trying to do it on your own. It's extremely difficult to light your own fire on those things, right? Because of all of the self-doubt and the self-talk. And just to have someone to be with you and cut through a lot of that is super beneficial. So kudos to you. Congratulations for progressing through and doing the training and doing the work. I know it's a lot of work, but it's all good stuff. So congratulations to you, Mr. Cole. And I'm sure we'll have you on a future show to tell us when you get done and maybe share some stories that you've been able to uncover.
Yeah.
So, but this has been great. Thank you, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us for another chat about your retirement and finances. Please hit that subscribe button. You can also contact us at srbadvisors.com or email us at info@srbadvisors.com. See you next time on Kitchen Table Finance.